And so you're just left with this question of like, so why does it exist in this form? And you can only answer that question by appealing to an external cause. And, obviously you can maybe always point to another mutable cause that caused this mutable thing to have its form. But you can only do that for so long, because now you're just going to raise the question, well, why does this other mutable reality, why does it have the form that it has? And you can just keep pushing it back infinitely far. And ultimately what you'll end up with is you'll just have this infinite series of cause and effects. And the question you'll be confronted with is, well, why this series? One way I like to, this might help you conceptualize what I'm trying to get at here. For example, if, some people if you ask them like, okay, why is the world the way that it is? The temptation for some is that, well, if you consider those moments which came prior, every present moment can be explained in light of that which came previously. So you might say something like, event, let's just call it event A. We'll put it over here. Why did event A occur? Well, you can appeal to event B, which came before A. And event B is what causes A. And so then you ask, like, okay, well then what caused B to occur? And we can just throw out event C. And then we can ask, well, what caused C? And we can just keep doing this forever. So that, D, and then I'll just put periods. This is infinity. It just goes on forever, right? Or you
eventually you work yourself back to the Big Bang.
Unless you have an infinite amount of, which in the ancient world.
Cause the Big Bang.
That's the Big Bang.
So interestingly, in the world that Paul is speaking, and the common belief was that there was no beginning to the natural world, and so that there is no first moment to nature. So that's just, you just have this infinite series of moments stretching back into the past. And it's actually relatively recent that scientists have come to the opinion that there is a first moment in the universe, which they refer to the Big Bang. I think that really didn't come to prominence until the mid 1900s. So it's actually really relatively recent. Yeah.
So in Paul's time, they wouldn't have believed in the 7th day of creation, or
The Greeks wouldn't have. Jews, of course, those who had the Word of God. Yeah.
Okay.
The 6 days of creation. Yeah. But outside of Judaism, the consensus was that the natural world has always existed without beginning. And while it's not the consensus among most scientists now, it has been the consensus for the most of human history, I guess. And who knows what scientists will believe, another few decades from now. But so let's just say, for the sake of argument, that nature has always existed without a beginning. We can grant the ancient pagans their assumption and see what comes of it. What you end up getting is this just infinite regress of mutable causes or events. And the question that you'll be confronted with is, well, why this infinite series? We can call this, I don't know what you call it, infinite, we'll just call it infinite series infinite series 1, I guess, which supposedly describes our world. But why not have a second infinite series, which we can call infinite series 2?
They do. It's called the Matrix.
Some people call it multiverse too.
Yeah, multiverse.
Let's say, but in this case, this is a hypothetical infinite series. And let's say that in this series, we have a different set of events, which we'll just number, it's different than this one. So we'll just do, not A is caused by event, not B or something. And you can just keep going back, not C. And so what you end up getting is this other hypothetical series where all of these events are just stretched back without beginning. And the metaphysical question is, why does our world resemble this series and not this series? Why does our world subsist in these moments and not these moments? Since when we consider the nature of creation, it could just as easily have subsisted in these moments. And realize that at this point, you can't appeal to any single moment in natural history to answer the question. That would be begging the question. If I appeal to, okay, well, why does the world subsist? Why does infinite series 1 exist? And I say, well, because of moment way back here, Z or something. Because of moment Z, well, moment Z is a part of the infinite series. And I'm asking, why does this infinite series exist? So you can't appeal to something within the series to explain why the series exists.
If there's no beginning. Unless you can tie it all the way back, because it's infinite, unless you can tie it all the way back to a starting point, then neither one of them makes sense from each other.
So I would argue that regardless of whether there's a first moment in history or not, you're still confronted with the question of like, well, why does history subsist in these moments rather than in this set of moments over here?
Well, because wouldn't their argument be then, because they can prove it 2 + 2 + 2, or A, B, C, D, all the way back to a starting point? Wouldn't that be their argument? Like,
So,
if
yeah.
2 + 2 has to equal 4, which is what science is saying, then by going back from A, B, C, D, adding 2 + 2 + 2, they can end up with where we are now, or
Sure.
post equal sign of 128, right?
So if I understand what you're saying, I think I understand
I
what
don't
you're
understand.
saying.
You got me on rabbit trails now.
So the temptation that people fall into is that they think that, well, if I can explain the existence of A with B, and I can explain the existence of B with C, and so on, for infinity and if there is no first moment, because if you say there's a first moment, then the question is going to become, well, what caused the first moment? But so then what they do is, well, maybe there is no first moment. Maybe it's just, it goes back infinitely, and therefore I can explain the existence of A by the infinite series of causes that came before. And I can explain the existence of B with the infinite series of causes that came before it. And I can explain it, and therefore the question's answered. I don't have to.
Wasn't that kind of where we are today in society? And I say in society meaning the secular world outside of the Christian viewpoint, is that they have literally defined where we are now based exactly on what you just said, by going back to the first known. We'll say the first known, right? So almost like, as we're using science and carbon dating and everything, we get back to a certain point. After that, we're not quite sure, but we know why we are where we are based off of as far as we can go down the infinite timetable, right?
Right. Yep. And then what I'm pointing out is that, okay, we can grant them that. For the sake of argument, we can give that to them. The question we're going to ask is, why this series? Why does the world subsist in this series and not some other series of moments? Is that making sense? So whether or not the universe... Oh, go ahead.
Before this was there time and space? And since we're fallen beings, and with a mind, pick up some reason why we're here. And then if we're not spiritually born again, we can't turn to God to believe in faith that He made this. And then that's when our being started.
Right.
Physical world.
Right. And yeah, the first thing I think you asked the question, how did you phrase it about time and space? That did time and space exist prior?
Was there time and space before this?
Right. Yeah. That's an excellent question. If time and space are in fact creation, then there is no time and space before creation, right? So time and space is a part of creation. That, of course, means that God transcends time and space. And that's the other thing that I want to point out with this, is that the only way, because we're essentially looking at two distinct timelines here, and we could posit an indefinite number of other possible timelines. Obviously, we need an explanation for why one timeline exists rather than why some other timeline doesn't exist. And whatever the explanation is, it has to transcend time itself. Otherwise, you're just going to push the question further back. So for example, if I were to say that, well, and of course I believe creation has a beginning in Genesis. So I don't believe history goes back for an infinite number of moments, but for the sake of argument, let's say God